God made us for connection with Him and each other. He intended for us to live in a safe world, founded on love, freedom, and responsibility, but the fall permanently altered the nature of relationships. At some point, we all experienced the sadness of discovering that the world and the people in it were not as safe as we had thought. Along with understanding that there is no perfection in others, we also must come to terms with our own imperfection. In this session, Dr. Cloud discusses 4 ways we lose our safety because of our own sin, and 4 ways we experience being unsafe because of the actions of others.
Hey guys, welcome to chapter 4 of Safe People. And in this chapter, we're going to talk about why are we in this mess to begin with. It's called How Did We Lose Our Safety? Now, let me tell you a little bit about why this is important. A lot of times we get caught in the squabbles of, this argument and that argument. And really what we're fighting about is not what we're fighting about, because there are root causes to relationship breakdown. And it all basically is laid out there for us in the story in the Garden of Eden. So I'm going to take you on a little Sunday school lesson here and try to make all that very simple. Now, here was the original design, right? You got God, and God made us, right? See how skinny I used to be? This was good before everything went bad. Let's put some hair on Eve, and she's smiling, right? And so you've got this thing called connection. We call it intimacy. And basically it's oneness. It's what you feel in your best relationships where you're really, really connected because there's nothing in the way. So we had that kind of relationship with God, right? And then we had that same kind of love with each other. And so in this connection, the first thing we have is we have perfect love. Perfect love. Nothing ever goes wrong. It's just, you're just swimming in love. You've experienced that in moments when it wasn't disconnected. That's what it's like. That's how we're designed to live all the time. Now, the second thing about this is notice that nobody's like, yeah, I'm in your face and all this naggy kind of control stuff. The second thing is that there was total freedom. In other words, Adam wants to go off and play golf. Because I bet there were great golf courses in the Garden of Eden. Or she wants to go play golf or tennis, or, maybe Adam wants to go shopping. I fooled you there, right? So you got all this stuff going on that they have their own individual lives, but they have a life together. And they don't control each other. And there's total freedom. And the freedom, the separateness, never breaks down the love. Nobody's threatened by it, which we see now, which we'll get to. But the third thing is, if you got freedom, then you have to always have something that equals freedom. And that is that each person is responsible for themselves, not for the other person. Codependency is where we feel like we have to take responsibility for somebody who's not being responsible for themselves. So in every great relationship, what you've got, think about, if you're married, your spouse, your kids, if you're single, whoever you're dating or looking to marry, or even in your extended family, if everybody loved perfectly, right? If everybody let each other be free, but in that freedom, the other person didn't abuse it and acted responsible to the relationship, oh my gosh, isn't that what everybody fights about? So here's what happened. There's this little snaky guy that came into, actually he wasn't a snake yet, he was a serpent. He was cunning and smart and beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And what he says is, you know what, guys, this human thing? And the human thing means that like you're not in charge of the universe. You actually have a role and you have to, there's sort of a parent figure in there that God, now there's some good things to that, right? God gives you all these trees and this great garden and this, that, and the other. But he also gets to say, guys, do it this way. Sort of like, a mom or dad says to a kid, don't run in the street. If you do that, it's going to hurt, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, God got to play the big role because he's bigger than us. Now, all that he told Adam and Eve was this: don't try to be God. That's what, it wasn't an apple eating a fruit. That symbolizes, remember what it says, the tree is the knowledge of good and evil. Now think about this. What if you were in a relationship and nobody tried to judge each other? Nobody's trying to act like, well, I know what's good for you, or I know what's good for you, or I know what's good and bad, and you're not good enough. See, in every relationship, what do we do that screws it up? We either judge the other person or we judge ourselves. Like, they're not good enough, they're not acting good enough for me to love well, right? They were being snitty, so now I'm going to be snitty. See, we're judging. Or we feel like we're not good enough for somebody's love, and we feel insecure. And so the whole judgment thing is a problem. But what the serpent tempted them into doing is, what was the line? It says, what did the fruit symbolize? You can be like God. See, you don't have to be a human in your relationship. You ever been in a relationship with somebody that acts like they're God? How gross is that? Well, that's the problem. And what the serpent did was say, stop being a human, be God. You can be God. You can become like him, is what they said. So what happened is, basically, when we kind of, flipped off God and said, we don't need you, we'll be our own gods, that's the whole problem. See, it's not about this little rule and that little rule. It's about, am I a human or am I God? And you look at every single relationship struggle that anybody's ever had, and it all goes back to, are they being human with each other, or are they trying to play God with each other? The aggressive kind by being domineering, or the codependent kind by trying to think they can cure somebody or fix somebody who doesn't want to be fixed, or, a lot of different ways. But the point is that we stopped being human with each other, and we tried to play God with each other. So what happens when this thing called original sin, what happens? Well, what we did was, I'll probably disappear from the screen there, sorry. What we did was we broke this relationship, right? Put that back up there. We broke it, so we're separated from God, and we got separated from each other. And when we lose love because we went away from it, God didn't do this to us, we're the ones that said, I don't need you, and we leave home. Then when we're not connected to love, because he was the source of love, when we're disconnected from love, what happens? We get afraid, we get insecure. Have you ever been in a relationship where there's perfect love? What do? You're not defensive, you're not covering up. If you feel safe, you don't give excuses, and you don't get defensive and blame and all that kind of stuff. If you feel accepted, what do? You're vulnerable and you own things. Here's the Bible's word. You're naked and unashamed. Naked means I'm not covering anything up and I'm not ashamed. We're just in a relationship. Well, what happened was when we lost our safety, we didn't have love. So now I notice it. I'm naked. I'm vulnerable. Naked means vulnerable. So I'm vulnerable. And what did? I got a fig leaf and covered up the symbol of my most vulnerability. And that is what happens in relationships. That we lost love, and so now we put barriers, the fig leaf symbols barriers. We cover ourselves up with each other, and here's the problem. Now we got problems, and we feel like we're God. Have you ever been in a relationship with an addict of any kind? They have more problems, right? And when they're using drugs or not taking responsibility for themselves, they got all the problems, and they act like they're God. You can't tell them anything. They're right about everything, and they tell you what's wrong with you. See, that's the problem. When we are broken and omnipotent, that is the problem in life. Now, what happens when we take that is four things. The first thing is when we try to be God, we become self-sufficient. In other words, we stop needing each other. Well, I'm not going to need this wacko. They're crazy, right? Or they might hurt me. So we become self-sufficient and we try to provide our own love. And that never works because we run out. We need to be loved. We need to be dependent on each other in a good way, mutual dependency, in order to function well. So we try to become self-sufficient. The second one is, I'm sorry, I should have said the first one, but I'll just flip the order so you can do that on your outline. But the first problem was we are envious, because envy is basically what original sin was. That being me is not good enough. I envied God. I want to be like God. And once we become envious, have you ever known anybody that's envious? What do? They feel entitled. Envy means I want what's not mine. I'm a human. I can't be God. But what that carries over to all of life is now I feel like I deserve stuff from everybody. You should treat me better. Or you should do this, or you should do that, or somebody should pay my way, or something. That's what basically original sin is about. It's our envy. So in relationships, now I feel like I'm entitled to you giving me everything I want, And the opposite of envy is gratitude. See, in a real love relationship, somebody treats you nicely, what happens? You feel, oh my gosh, you were so nice. Thank you so much. And gratitude returns love. That's the opposite of envy. See, envy says, well, you should treat me well, and when you don't, you're bad. And that's the problem of how we lost our safety in envy. And then the third one is that we think we are, because of this envy, we think we are special. Remember I said that envy leads to entitlement? We think that we are special, meaning if you're special, somebody ought to treat you special, right? And so now we even have a higher bar for feeling like, you know, if you've ever read any of the articles about entitled people that, you know, show up for jobs and mommy treats them as they're special or daddy treats them as they're special, and a boss doesn't really think they're so special unless they perform. Well, in a relationship, guess what? Get off the couch, you know, perform, show up in a relationship. We have to show up. We're not entitled to special treatment just because we're there. Talk to a lot of people who, you know, are in relationships, and what's happening is somebody thinks they are entitled to all this special treatment, but they don't give anything. And so when they get the special treatment, they think, well, that's normal. You should treat me that way. And when they don't, they get judgmental. Instead of, if somebody is nice to you or gives something to you, you're grateful. And that's the problem with this. And so the next one, the fourth one, is that we transgress God's law, which basically means that, you know, we don't do things like they were designed. So what is all this stuff about God's law and this, that, and the other? It's very, very simple. Gravity is a law, okay? God has built laws into the universe. They're not rules. They're the way things work. Now, there is a law that says if I place this down, this marker, on this little table, guess what? I'm working with the design of the universe, and the laws work for me. I can find my marker. I can leave my outline here. I can set this stuff down because I'm obeying God's laws. And when you build an airplane, the engineers build it to work in accordance with God's rules and regulations of physics, right? Relationships are the same way. He has laws. He says, treat others like you would want to be treated. He said all of his rules come down to that one rule of love. So his law says, treat him, and Adam, you treat her. Those are the rules like you would want to be treated. Don't hit her, and don't control her, and don't spit on her, and treat her with respect, and she does the same with you. See, those are the rules. It's sort of like when a parent says to the kid, okay, you guys can have a birthday party. Now, don't put ice cream in each other's eyes or sticks in each other's eyes, because then this party's not going to be fun, okay? But see, when we said we're God, instead of obeying God's laws, we think we can make up our own rules. And what happens is we don't get the rules right, and when we break the rules, now gravity, love, rules, design is not working for us. It works against us. Oh! See, I dropped it. I should have obeyed gravity. Use it like it's designed. Don't break the law, because I hurt my toe when I dropped it. Okay? So, excuse me. There, I'm back. That's the way it works. So what we're talking about here in all relationship problems, if we just would think about it, that gosh, I need to love you perfectly. Now I'm going to fall short, but perfect in the Bible means mature. So I need to love in a way that love was designed to love. I need to not control you, and I also need to have good boundaries and not be controlled by other people. And the third thing is, I need to be responsible with the freedom you give me. If you say you love me and you trust me, and then I should use the trust that you've given me responsibly and merit the relationship that we have, okay? But what happens is, if I go, well, you know, I'm not a human, I'm God, then what have I started to do? I've elevated myself up here, and now I don't really need you. And in fact, I judge you, and I'm envious, and so I'm self-sufficient, and so now I'm, macho person, but really I'm empty inside, and I act that out in weird ways. So I'm self-sufficient, I'm envious, thinking that I'm entitled to stuff, and I want what I don't have, and all the envy and judgmentalism as opposed to gratitude, and then I deserve to be treated special, right? Because I'm God. See, I'm really better than you are, and you should serve me, and also I can break all the rules I want. Not a good formula, okay? So this is what bugs me, actually. I was having a conversation with a friend about this earlier today, that all this religious noise has really gotten in the way of God's design. And church and rules and shaming and judgmentalism, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says it's about love and freedom and being responsible to each other in our relationships. And when those break down, we become too independent, we become judgmental, we become entitled, and we do a bunch of junk to each other. That's it. And you know what? If people could have churches and relationships and marriages and friendships and all that would just reverse the fall, which is exactly what God said. He said, look, all I'm asking you guys to do is to come back to the original design. Don't try to be God. Let me be God. I'll provide for your needs. And you be equal with each other and treat each other well. And stop being self-sufficient. Get what you need from outside of yourselves. Don't be envious. Be grateful. And don't act like you are special. You're just like everybody else. Everybody's the same, and we perform for each other. And then don't poke people in the eye. Don't transgress the rules. And that's how it all works. That's basically the gospel. Jesus came back to say, look, I'll identify with you as a person, but I want you to come back into relationship with God and get things working again. So that's kind of the message. All right. So got a couple of questions for you in your groups. Number one, can you think of a specific instance where you recognize unsafe traits in a person that you cared about, some of the stuff we've been talking about, and how did that make you feel? See, remember, rules are not just to have rules. Rules are that if we break them, it hurts. So if you can get all this out of the religious stuff and just see that there's a design, when somebody breaks the design, how did that feel? How does it feel if somebody plays God in your life, for example, or is judgmental or something? The second one, think of a time when your own actions, I did specific things that hurt people. What was the result? If I get judgmental or controlling, what is the result in the relationship? And then the third one, what traits of being unsafe do you most struggle with? Because one of the things to remember, to make a relationship work, we can't walk in going, well, I see our relationship's not working. It's because you. Now, there's a place for that after me. So I've got to go to somebody and say, you know what, I can see my side of this. I can see how sometimes I don't love you very well, and sometimes I get controlling, and sometimes I'm not very responsible. And so let's take ownership, the log out of our own eye first before we try to get the speck out of somebody else's eye. And let's find out, how can I be a better person of safety? Okay, that's it. Time for the next chapter after you do all this, but do this hard work first. Okay, see you next time.